Well, it says it's 7 o'clock, so I'll call a meeting to order. I'm going to take attendance. I see everyone here, but I'm going to call it anyway. Councillor Cross?
Here.
Councillor Maxwell?
Present.
And Councillor Olmsted?
Present.
Good evening, everyone. Does anyone have any written disclosure of pecuniary conflicts of interest? Councillor Cross?
I don't believe I do.
Councillor Maxwell?
You have one issue with the budget under the fire department. Come to my attention that my son is on the fire department, so I will not be contributing any comments in that area.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Olmsted?
Yeah, I do. Number 6E, I have large animals and I use this service for the veterinarian services.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I sent in my paperwork. You're welcome.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is petitions and delegations. And we have Judy Kleinhaus from Grant Thornton Financial Statements. And Judy's here tonight to tell us all about what we're doing right.
Okay.
So if you could take over, Judy.
Sure, thank you. So in your package, you should have 3 documents. And I'd like to start with the document that is the consolidated, the draft financial statements for the municipality itself. It's the one that does not have the Grant Thornton logo on it. And just want to spend a couple minutes on the independent auditor's report. So just sort of a reminder what the audit is all about. And so when we do the audit, we audit for what we call reasonable assurance. We're not auditing for absolute assurance because you probably would never get to absolute assurance because you can't audit what's not there. And we're auditing for what we call a material misstatement. So we're not saying, for example, that these statements may not contain a $10,000 error. If it did, that level of error would be not material. What we're saying is if we found a material error such as, let's say, a $100,000 misstatement, then that would be considered material. And our first approach would be to ask management to make the correction. And if management for some reason chose not to correct a material misstatement, then we would actually change our audit opinion. And in terms of the audit work that we do at the planning stage, we sort of sit down and identify the areas of risk, and we spend more of our audit efforts in the areas of higher risk. We do a lot of audit work, but more effort in risky areas. And we're not auditing every account or every transaction or every dollar that goes through the books. We have different techniques depending on the nature of the account and the risk involved. And on some accounts, we might test any balance greater than a specific scope. In another account, we might do some analytical trend analysis compared to budget, compared to prior years, 5-year trend, so forth. And in other accounts, we just put the whole population of expenditures or items into the computer and let it pick a sample. So again, our efforts are spent in the riskier areas. And although we do look at your internal controls sufficient to plan the audit and decide what we're going to do in those audit areas, this is not an opinion on your controls. It's strictly an opinion on the financial numbers. And without an audit committee, effectively council is the group that's charged with governance and having responsibility for overseeing the municipality's financial reporting process. So our opinion on the audit report was as follows. In our opinion, the company financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the corporation of the municipality of Calvin as at December 31st, 2020, and its results of operations, its changes in its net financial assets, and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with the Canadian public sector accounting standards. So in other words, that is a clean audit opinion on those statements. So now if we move on to the next page, which is your statement of financial position. On this financial statement, you'll see the reporting of the municipality's financial assets, liabilities, and non-financial assets. So financial assets are items that are either cash today or going to turn into cash at some point. in the future and are comprised of things like all of the money that is sitting in various bank accounts, as well as some investments. In this case, it's strictly a one single GIC that was purchased for 6 months. And your taxes receivable, which is any taxes owing from the municipal taxpayers, including current year taxes, prior year taxes, arrears, and penalties. And although the current year taxes for 2020 as a percent of total taxes is 58%, which is kind of consistent with last year's current taxes being 59% of the prior year total. What's interesting is that the increase in the tax arrears balance comes from the 2+ years accounts. So the ratio of current is still the same. Accounts receivable is comprised of any items that are owing to the municipality aside from taxes. So in this case, any types of government grants that might be receivable at year end, as well as HST rebates. So about $46,000 of this year's balance with HST rebates. So once the HST rebate is filed, the municipality will see that refund come back. You'll see a decrease from last year, and that's because last year there was a much larger HST rebate based on the larger infrastructure projects that took place last year. Plus, it was also a $50,000 grant receivable for the asset management grant that was outstanding at year end last year. So you have total financial assets of about 1.1 million. Then you move on to your liabilities, which is comprised of any items that the municipality owes to third parties. So accounts payable and accrued liabilities would be anything that is either an invoice for goods received or services rendered prior to December 31st, for which the payment wasn't made till after December 31st, as well as any accrued liabilities such as vacation pay owing. So any liabilities of that nature. Deferred revenue general is just any revenue which is funding that's received by the municipality, which the stipulations of the funding agreement hasn't been met yet. So last year's balance was comprised of the cannabis funding. This year, that has not been spent. Plus, there's been an addition of items, one being the $5,000 equipment donation and $20,000 of the second batch of COVID funding. So the balance is 40. The deferred revenue obligatory is comprised of any revenues received for which there's legislation or regulations stipulating how the money is to be spent, comprised of things like the gas tax, parkland, and the OCIF funding. So this year there was an increase in the balance coming from the gas tax. So all of the gas tax money received this year was not spent, so $33,000. And then the OCIF funding of about $50,000 added to the balance. And again, none of last year's money was recognized into revenue this year, so the balance is growing. Municipal debt is comprised of the grader loan back from 2019 and the fire pumper truck loan back from 2015. So that's the remaining balance owing on those loans. And there was one extra, almost $40,000 extra lump sum payment that was made this year on the grader. The tangible capital lease liability is comprised of just the accounting for the photocopier lease. Employee future amounts payable relates to your sick leave liability. So this is an estimate of the sick leave based on sort of the usage rate of people taking their sick time. And then the last liability is the landfill closure and foreclosure liability. So this is an accounting estimate that involves making assumptions regarding costs, inflation rate to take those costs into the future, discount rate to discount the funds back to today's dollars. So effectively, as you use up the landfill, there's more capacity used, but also there was a change in the assumption. And in this case, when the interest rate assumption changes for a decrease, it actually increases the liability. The total liability is about $1 million. So if you deduct your liabilities from your financial assets, you get net financial assets of $145,000. That's a positive figure, which means you've already raised funds for things that haven't happened yet. Then you get into your non-financial assets, which are comprised of items that are not cash today and they're not intended to turn into cash anytime soon. So the bulk of that being your tangible capital assets. So the 3.6 million is the accounting net book value of all of the municipality's assets, all of the infrastructure, the roads, all of the vehicles, equipment, building structures, computers, office furniture, everything that's in there. And it definitely gets put on the books at the cost when it was purchased, and it gets amortized over time based on the useful life of each of those assets. So this year the balance went down, but actually it's comprised of, there were additions of about 149,000, which was mainly road work. There was some disposals, but then there was an offset amortization that decreases about 272,000. Again, this is the accounting net book value. It is not representative of fair value if you were to sell. So although the municipality does sell surplus assets once in a while, its main business is not to sell its assets because it requires those assets to provide municipal services. Then you have inventory supplies, which is just things like fuel, sand, culverts, items that have been paid for and not used at December 31st. And then the last non-financial asset is prepaid expenses. So these are items such as insurance and memberships and software support payments regarding service contracts that were paid but extend beyond December 31st. So we have non-financial assets of about $3.6 million. So for accounting purposes, that leads to what's called an accumulated surplus of 3.8 million. But I do always caution when you read that number that it is an accounting surplus and it is not the same as an annual surplus. So if you jump to note 15 on page 16, this note is really important and it has to be read in conjunction with the statements because that note explains what that balance is comprised of. Again, the accumulated surplus for accounting purposes has various components, including your reserves and reserve funds. So about 674,000 of that balance relates to reserves and reserve funds. And then $3.6 million of that $3.8 million is the investment in your tangible capital assets. So again, understanding that this accumulated surplus number of 3.8 is not implying that you have $3.8 million of surplus to spend because a chunk of that is tied up in your tangible capital assets. So that's a very important note to understand when you read the financials because this is not the way you budget as a municipality. So the number that you take into account for your budgets, it's under other called general operating surplus of ending balance of 145,236. For budgeting purposes, that's the number that you would budget as revenue for next year. So it's, again, just a reminder what the accumulated surplus means for accounting purposes. So then if we make our way back to page 4, page 4 is the statement of operations. And in this statement is where the municipality reports all of its revenue and all of its expenses. And again, for accounting purposes, expenses are different than expenditures. So an expenditure means that money has left the bank, but for accounting purposes, an expense has to meet a certain definition. So things like purchasing equipment and building of roads, although they are expenditures, they are not expenses for accounting purposes because they are capitalized. Likewise, revenue, when you do your budget, you would budget revenue. For example, your reserve transfers would be showing up as revenue line. If you get new debt financing, the debt proceeds would show up as revenue, but for accounting purposes, those are not revenue items. So when we look at the revenue, which is made up of station, user charges, government transfers, and then other, which is everything else, then we have our actuals came in at 1.6 million, which is about 103% over of the budgeted amount. And there are some significant differences in the government transfers line. So you'll see that there's a significant decrease from the prior year. So the first thing there is last year, there was about $207,000 of one-time modernization funding that was received. Wasn't received this year. There was an extra $143,000 OCIF funding. And also last year, based on the work that was done, there was some gas tax revenue that was recognized. So that explains the significant decrease from last year. You're slightly over budget on this one because the second batch of the COVID-19 Safe Restart funding of $34,000 was not something that was budgeted for at the time. Your other revenue is comprised of anything such as interest and penalties, penalties and interest on tax arrears, investment income, miscellaneous fire department revenues, and so forth. And you'll see an increase from last year there because during the year there was some tax sale surplus proceeds for this year. So again, total revenues came in at 103% of budget. When you look at your expenses came in at $1.6 million compared to a budget of 1.7. so came in at 93% of budget. And effectively, pretty much every category is under budget, which is good news. Now, there's lots of categories, lots of accounts that make up these different categories. And effectively, there is an under budget position in various accounts and it all accumulates. It's not like there's one big account, for example, where you're under budget by 50,000 or 60,000. There's various, some accounts are under budget by 7,000, some accounts are under budget by 2,000. So it's just an accumulation of small variances, but not one big variance per se. But overall, under budget leads to an annual surplus for accounting purposes of $44. When you add that to your opening balance of 3.8 million, you end up with the 3.805557 that refers again back to note 15. Then you get into the next statement, which is your statement of change in net financial assets. This is a statement that you unfortunately only see once per year. This is a statement that is required under the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. And the purpose of the statement is to reconcile items, for example, that either use up cash or for which you incur debt, but they don't flow through the annual surplus because they're not an expense, for example. So here's where you see the fact that you would acquire tangible capital assets. So you either pay for those assets using cash or you pay for them by borrowing on a loan. So it affects your net financial position. And then you have the offset of the amortization expense, which is a non-cash item. As you write off the assets over their lives, this is a non-cash item. So this explains how we started the year with net financial assets of 23,000, and we've improved that position by 122,000, end up the year at 145. And again, this ties back to page 3. The next page is the statement of cash flows. Again, another financial statement that you only see once per year. And the purpose of this, the purpose of this statement is every single number on here comes from the previous 5 pages. And effectively, the purpose of this statement is to reconcile how the cash really flows. Because for accounting purposes, you're showing an annual surplus of 44, but the bank balance went up by 193,000. So how does that happen? That happens because of the timing of the cash flows. So something called revenue in your annual surplus before you see the money, and something can be called an expense in your annual surplus before you actually pay the invoice. Plus other items that affect cash that don't flow through the annual surplus, such as acquisition of your tangible capital assets, purchase of your investments, repayment of your long-term debt. These are all things that use up cash, but they don't get expensed on the annual surplus. So all these numbers effectively just come from all the other statements, and it's just showing you how the cash is flowing during the year to explain the increase in the bank balance by 193,000. Started the year at 630. You end up in the year with 824,000 of cash equivalents. Now the next, the rest of the pages in the statement address all of the municipalities' accounting policies. So effectively, there were no changes to the municipalities' policies, as well as there was no required changes this year to be implemented by the Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. So there's really nothing that's changed in those policies. Those notes are explaining all of the policies, as well as any supplementary notes that support any of the figures in the first 5 pages of the statements. So the only note that's effectively new this year is if you go to page 21, note 20 on page 21 is a new, and effectively this note is sort of summarizing what we all know, which is, COVID-19 has impacted every organization in some manner. So the first part of note 20 is pretty generic. It's just explaining, what happened with the COVID-19 pandemic. The middle paragraph is specific to the municipality with respect to some of the significant, this doesn't cover everything, it would just cover the significant transactions. So the Safe Restart funding and how that was applied. And then the last paragraph is just effectively mentioning that the pandemic is still ongoing. There is some uncertainty about future financial results, and we can't predict what those are going to be. So this is a new note for this particular year. So before I move on to the other items, is there any questions on this financial statement?
Appears not.
Okay, so seeing as there's no questions, the next one I'm not going to walk through in detail is the trust fund statement. Again, set of financial statements under Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. I won't go through it unless there's any questions. But the report that I do want to walk through is the report on the Grant Thornton letterhead, the one that's labeled Report to Council, Audit Strategy and Results. So effectively, this report is the deliverable as an auditor, which discharges my responsibilities as the auditor to communicate with those charged with governance, in this case, council. And this is a summary of our audit strategy as well as our results and our significant findings. So I won't go through every section, but effectively, heading into the meeting tonight, our audit is complete. A couple things remain outstanding. Number one is management will be signing and returning to us a representation letter, which is effectively a letter that is part of our audit, where management acknowledges that they've disclosed everything they're aware of. They've provided us all the accounting records and various assertions. The next is approval of financial statements by council. And then today we were just wrapping up our second events procedures. Our audit report hopefully will be dated today on the assumption that the council approves these statements. So our audit report has to cover all of the activities up to today to make sure there's nothing between January 1st and today that might need to be reflected in December financial statements. So in terms of our audit approach and our audit risks, one thing that's new again on page 2 is the COVID-19 impact. So in this case, the municipality received some extra funding. There was some suspension of interest on taxes. There was extra operating costs with respect to purchase of PPE and so forth. But at the end of the day, we did have to look at other items such as, are there any assets that are impaired because of COVID-19? Are there any items that need to be written down in terms of their valuation and so forth? So we didn't find any such items. So the quantitative impact was limited to what's disclosed here and what's included in the note that we just talked about. Our next significant risk is a presumed risk of fraud in the auditing standards. That risk is this with revenue, and the presumption is that that's the area of risk. And in terms of the municipality, one area that we focus on is grant revenue recognition and making sure that expenses are eligible for the grant for which the money is being reported against, making sure that the revenue is recorded in the right period, and that there's no incentive to record, for example, recording expenses too early or recording ineligible expenses in order to avoid repaying a surplus and so forth. So we do look at a number of transactions where we test the eligibility of the grant expenses. We review the grant agreements, make sure we understand all the stipulations to make sure that revenue is recorded or deferred as appropriate. And there were no exceptions noted. The next significant risk is risk of management override. And again, this is another presumed risk of fraud. And this has to do with the fact that no matter how good the organization's internal controls might be, all that can be undone with manipulation by journal entry. So we look at journal entries to make sure that the journal entry is a valid business reason and that they make sense, and that the journal entries are not used to move things around. For example, if you had 2 funding envelopes and one's under budget, one's over budget, and someone could use a journal entry to move things around to avoid repaying a surplus, or moving journal entries around to late records. So we didn't find any exceptions in our testing. And then the last significant risk has to do with segregation of duties. And as you know, the smaller the environment, the increased risk that comes with segregation of duties or lack thereof, because one person may be doing more than one thing. So one area here, for example, is, there's a risk in anybody who has access to the payroll master file could theoretically change their pay rate that's not been authorized. So we make sure that all the employees have access to the payroll master file, that their pay read to those approved by council, resolution, or other bylaws, and no exceptions noted there. Then the last area of where records could be manipulated is accounting estimates, because estimates are not always black and white; they can be gray. So we look at estimates to make sure that there's no management bias, so that you don't have a situation where management's trying to manipulate the records by one year being at the low end of the estimate range and the next year being at the high end of the estimate range. So the estimate of the municipality, there's 3 significant ones. The first one is tangible capital asset. So the asset itself is not an estimate because it's on the books at cost. However, the useful life is the estimate. So depending on what the useful life is, that's how you amortize your assets. So that estimate, if you estimate an asset to last 5 years, that 5 years is an estimate because it could last 6 or it could last 7. So we look at the amortization policies compared to the bylaw, recompute amortization to make sure it's reasonable compared to that bylaw. The next estimate is the sick leave liability. Again, that liability is an estimate because you have to make assumptions regarding someone's usage of their sick days based on historical or predicted values to make sure that it's a reasonable assumption. And then last one is the landfill closure that we talked about earlier, which has a whole bunch of estimates in that calculation. And again, we look at management's calculation, recompute the calculation, look at all the inputs to see if they're reasonable compared to the prior year, compared to the known outcomes. So those are the significant areas. You'll see in the other appendix that we do work in other areas, but those would be the significant risk areas. In terms of adjustments and unrecorded misstatements, we did not have any adjustments to report. In terms of internal control, we did not identify any what we would consider a significant deficiency that required to be reported. And then we confirm we are independent. Again, as auditors, we must be independent in order to issue our audit report. And then the rest of the items are just some extra items and more details, but effectively the accounting and audit assurance updates. You'll notice in the appendices that a lot of the accounting changes that were scheduled to come into effect in a year or so have all been deferred by a year because of COVID. Effectively, the Institute and the Standards Board, across the board, all financial reporting frameworks effectively deferred everything by a year because of COVID. So those appendices sort of talk about the future pronouncements that are coming out. Again, no impact on 2020 financial. Any questions on the actual audit results?
Anybody? No?
Okay, so I'm done for my part.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy.
Okay, thank you. Have a good.
You too.
Okay, thank you very much.
night.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is reports from municipal officers. I'm not sure if Chris is here.
No, unfortunately, Chris couldn't make it tonight.
Okay.
But if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to take them and find out the answers from him and get back to council.
Any questions, Councillor Croft?
No, everything was pretty straightforward. I understood it all.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell?
No questions.
And Councillor Olmsted?
No questions. It was very thorough.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Dean Maxwell, Fire Chief. Hello, Dean.
Can you hear me there?
Yes?
Yeah, all right. So for the month of April, we had 3 fire calls. We had our first one April 10th. It was on Highway 630 at 331, Highway 630. It was just a small shed fire. Pumper and PT2 went to scene. And once they got on scene, it was quickly put out. It was just a small shed fire. On April 16th, we had a vehicle fire on Boundary Road as well. Again, pumper was on scene, followed with PT2. Foam was used. It was quickly put out with the foam injection. It was Calvin resident, so there was no charge being there. On April 25th, we had another vehicle fire on Highway 630 near Suzanne Road. Again, with a Calvin Township resident. We used foam here on this incident again as well, and we had it under control within 20 minutes or so. For meetings and trainings, all meetings have been canceled for the month of April due to COVID-19. We're just trying to minimize our exposure. For the truck fleets, everything's pretty well running good. For the Chief's report, we've received our funding from the Ontario Fire Marshal's office to help with our training that we're doing right now that we've purchased. All SCBA, all our VA bottles have been returned back and have came back from testing with no issues. And because of all our car fires we've had in the last little while, we've had to replace 2 jugs of foam that we use at the car fires. Besides that, it's been a pretty quiet month. That's pretty well all I have for the month of April.
Sandy, you have any questions of Dean?
No questions. Thanks, Dean.
Councillor Maxwell?
No questions. Thank you.
Councillor Olmsted?
No question. Thank you. You guys do a great job.
Good report, Dean. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is Jacob Grove Recreational Landfill and Cemetery.
Hello.
Hi, Jacob.
Hi. So for recreation, the spring cleanup is still ongoing but nearly completed. I've included some information on refuge and recycling container for the public swimming area at the Amabdefo River. I included all the information in the package so council could review the information and make an educated decision as to whether or not they want to go ahead with this container. They are the same containers that are used at the rec center and the Smith Lake boat launch. If we're going to go ahead with this, I would recommend the dual bag container, one side for recycling, one side for garbage. And there's some other stuff in there about, depending on when we place the order, if we go ahead with this, what the steel surcharges would be. And they do expect that there will be a delay in receiving it of at least 60 days, probably closer to the 90-day mark from ordering it. And then I've also attached some information from the chief building official with regards to the storage area at the community center to give council some more information on the options that they wanted us to look into, so that council could further narrow the direction they wanted this to go. For landfill, I have found a service provider that would sort our recycling. I'm still waiting to receive a quote back from them. They indicated that they were not interested in transporting the material. So I am looking into some options for transporting that material, which will also be included in that report. Spring cleanup at the cemetery is nearly complete. It has been a bit slower this year with the wet April we had. For municipal enforcement, there were 2 new cases this month, and the new parking signs have been installed on Peddler's Drive, at the Amabdefo Bridge, and also at the Smith Lake boat launch. Are there any questions or discussion about some of those topics in this report?
Councillor Olmsted.
Hi, this is a really good report. Thank you very much. Very thorough. So the question is, I didn't see the price tags for the other garbage cans. Can we not do our own sorting, or do we need a separate?
The pricing for the other garbage cans was included in the quotes.
I didn't see them.
So the
in the back.
Hide-A-Bag 1, which is a single bag container, came at in at $2,172.75. And I'm just
I guess my question is would it be too hard to sort it to save us almost $1,000?
Would it be too hard to sort? It's going to depend on how long that garbage has been sitting there and how smelly it's gotten, sitting in a steel container at +30 in July.
Yeah. See, I didn't know how often we were going to change it or check it, or what kind of schedule there was on it.
I don't know what the schedule is going to be yet, because I don't know what the usage is going to be like.
Right. So it's hard to make that decision when we don't know what we need. Yeah.
Yeah, with the Smith Lake boat launch, with the garbage sitting for a week, getting emptied every week in the summer, it is quite ripe by the end of the week.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Any questions, Councillor Cross?
No, it was very thorough. The quotes are there. I do have a bit of hesitation on spending this kind of money on a garbage can. I understand that we, as council, had gone forward and said yes at the last meeting to go ahead with this, but I had no idea that the number was going to come in so high. Especially when we don't know exactly how much litter is being there. I've been down there several times and have never found any signs of litter. Is it an occasional thing? I'd like to maybe, should we consider signage of no littering, or there's a fine over spending close to $3,000 for a garbage can? That's how I feel about that. I mean, I mean, everything else has worked out perfectly. The ad hoc committee did a great job. It's just, that's an awful lot of money for a garbage can, and we really don't know how much garbage is going to be there. Signage, you know, $50 sign. I have great faith in our residents that they love this little spot. It's a secret little gem that only Calvin knows about, and I'd like to think that they're going to take care of it, or possibly it be gone. So that's all I have to say about that.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, the can does sound expensive, all right. The $3,000 for the garbage can. But we have to do it right as well. We have to make sure we do it properly. But we don't know the volume of what's going to be expected there. I'm wondering if we could postpone deciding on buying until next year, and try this summer just with a barrel. So just put a barrel there and see what we collect, and then decide next year based on if there's a need for it or not. It's just one idea. I don't know. I'm just concerned that our budget is going to be really struggling this year, and I don't want to put on any extra. I'm very careful on what we're spending money on this year, I think, because we're going to be a little bit stressed in our budget area. It looks like the budget's already coming in quite high, and we're going to be looking for areas of cuts. This may be one area where our residents may ask, like, do we really need to spend $3,000 on a garbage can? It's kind of like paper clips in one way, but still it's a little thing, but it's a big. We have to take care of the little things as well, so the big money takes care of itself.
Is that it, Dan?
Yeah, and was there one other purchasing item that we gave advice on? The can, and I thought there was one other item we was talking about.
The storage area for the center.
Oh yeah, the storage, with the CCAN report. Yeah, that's turning into an interesting topic. I don't have any comments on that right now, but we'll have to discuss that, how we're going to move forward with this, if we're going to move forward with the CCAN. I'm concerned that overall, that when I look at when I drive by the township, I look at the multiple shapes of buildings that are there, and the inconsistency of what we have on our property. I think that we have to be very careful that we tile the buildings together so that they're pleasant to the eye as well. And I think a CCAN may not do that. It may just make it look a little junky around there. Just the way the rink building has two different roofs on it drives me crazy when I look at that. But to throw in like a CCAN in there too, it's going to become a bit of an eyesore there if we're not careful. And we have to set a good example to our residents on how to properly use the CCAN as well. Because with the official plan, they're required to be in the backyard, and I think we're trying to keep them under control so that everybody doesn't have CCANs all over their properties everywhere. And so we have to set an example to our residents on what we expect as well. So if we do, we have to do it right. We have to make sure it's just not a short-term solution to save a bit of money. That's all I have to say.
Councillor Olmsted, I've seen your finger up there.
Yeah, those little, I don't want to say little, they're quite significant. The graded garbage cans that you put a fairly heavy duty garbage bag in. Can we not install one of those for the present time to alleviate some cost? I know it's not as safe, but just for the odd pop can or whatever going in there, for the swimming hole, could we just spend that? I understand you wanted to go big, but we can't have a garbage can that's going to go blown away. That's my opinion on that. But as far as the storage, I'm in favor of the non-heated, what our CBO suggested with the cinder block base with the same level. It looked like it pretty economical, and I think it would be in line with what Councillor Maxwell was saying. We could keep it the same color as the building. It doesn't have to be heated because it's just going to have its own closed door. So it's basically a shed attached to a building. So then we don't have to do any transporting outside. Cost is minimal. Safety. And then it can give the space that the Women's Association so greatly need. I don't know if we can cooperate with that.
Anything further?
The only thing with that is I don't know how long we're going to be still in lockdown, and is this a subject today? I understand we need to budget, but I mean, I can't see any construction happening until probably spring of next year, because with the lockdowns, and we won't be able to congregate until, I don't know, maybe September, they're saying. So that's the end of building season. You know, September comes, October. I don't want to say it, but the S word comes pretty much in October. So I feel that it won't happen until next spring. So perhaps we can put some money aside and look further at that later on in the year. Just
Is that all,
thoughts.
Heather?
That's it. Yes, it is. Thanks. Sorry.
I was thinking about the garbage can thing, and this is probably a silly idea, but there's not a lot happening at the community center right now, and there's people there every day. So I was wondering if it would be possible to transport the one outside of the door at the community center down to the swimming hole, and put something outside the community center that could be emptied every day, because there's usually somebody there every day. So that was one thought that entered my head. Another thought that entered my head was that we're spending well, not all this money, but we're spending $3,000 or so on a swimming hole when the people on our survey responded they didn't want anything done there. So that's just all I got to say on that one. And then for the storage container outside the community center at the back, I'd rather wait till next year than do anything this year. I'd kind of like to see what the uptake is on the hall after COVID relaxes a little bit. And that's all I have to say on those two subjects. So I don't know if we can move that garbage can or not, or if it's stationary where it is. I'm not sure. I know that I think there's cement on the bottom to keep it from falling over. Then we have to be conscious of bears too. If we have something at the community center like that with children and adults in the playground. That's all I got. Anybody else have any comments on that one? Yes, Cindy?
Just to add to your comment, that is a concern at the swimming hole as well, only because there will be children and adults at the swimming hole too. We don't want a whole bunch of animals there. The space isn't very big, that type of thing. So that's why we're also recommending this type of garbage can. That's all.
Dan?
do you like your idea of using one of our cans from the township office area now, and just trying out, we'll see how much volume there is this year as well. And I think that might be a good solution. And it'll save us having to put the money out this year.
Like, swimming's over probably end of August for sure, except for the diehards. So we can move the can back at that time, the garbage receptacle back at that time. And I think, not the bears aren't around all the time, but they're kind of looking for more food come fall time. So there's less food in the bush for them, so they might be coming out at that time. So it might be a good solution. Okay, I guess that's all then. Anybody else have anything to talk about on any of those items that Jacob has presented?
Well, I think your ideas are great. It didn't even dawn on me. Fantastic idea. I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
Yeah, no, I like the idea of trying one of our cans there. That's a great idea. I think we should move forward with that idea. And I'm not sure about the sea can yet neither, but I think it's probably a good idea to wait till next year. But we need to get a plan together for that in the meantime, exactly how we'll move forward with the costs.
Yeah.
And to be an extra budget, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cross, I've seen your hand up.
Could we ask Jacob if he knows if the garbage can is movable, which is a wonderful idea. I like that idea a lot. And if so, if it is movable, do we have to put maybe a block of concrete where it can be attached so it doesn't get hijacked?
Be heavy.
Jacob?
Yes, the can is movable. The concrete base would actually move with the garbage can. I believe that they install that as part of the deterrent for bears so they can't roll the can around and eventually bust into it. So we could coordinate with the roads department and use some of their equipment to relocate it to the Mab Defoe River for the summer and see how it goes.
Okay,
One more, would it be possible to keep a record of garbage collection of how much garbage technically was collected during that time, so it could be put in a report when we go to discuss this again?
Yeah, I can keep record of the garbage collected from there this summer.
Okay. Anything else on that one? I think we're got that one pretty much done with. Okay, so I'll move on to next item. And it's a report from Shane Conrad, Chief Building Official. Excuse me. Looks like one permit still not picked up, or the fee hasn't been collected for it. But they've issued one valued at $10,000 for a storage shed, so that's good, addition to the storage shed. Then next item on the agenda is reports from committees, and we don't have any of those. So next item is item number 6, it's action letters. The first item there is A, minutes of the council meeting. So we have a resolution to adopt the minutes of the Tuesday, April 27, 2021 council meeting. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Cross, can you move that one?
Yes, I can.
Councillor Olmsted, can you second that one?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we have this resolution moved by Councillor Cross, seconded by Councillor Olmsted, that minutes of the regular meeting of council held on Tuesday, April 27, 2021 be hereby adopted and signed as circulated. Is there any discussion on that, Councillor Cross?
No discussion.
Councillor Maxwell?
No discussion.
And Councillor Olmsted?
No discussion.
Okay, I'm going to call for a vote then to accept the minutes as presented. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no to accept them?
Yes, I do.
Councillor Maxwell, yes or no to accept them?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes as well. So this resolution is carried. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll need next item on the agenda is the Grant Thornton LLP. It's approval of the 2021 consolidated financial statements of the corporation. They hereby approved and presented by the municipal auditor Judy Kleinos, who's principal, Grant Thornton LLP. Am I saying the name correctly? Is it Kleinhaus?
Correct.
Yes? Okay. I didn't want to go on if it was, if I kept saying it wrong. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for this one. Councillor Maxwell, could you move this one, please?
Yes, again?
Thank you. And Councillor Cross, could you second this one?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So we have this resolution moved by Councillor Maxwell and seconded by Councillor Cross. That council hereby confirms that the 2020 consolidated financial statements of the corporation be hereby approved as presented by the municipal auditor Judy Kleinos, principal, Grant Thornton LLP. Any discussion required, Councillor Olmsted?
No discussion.
Councillor Maxwell?
No discussion?
And Councillor Cross?
No discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to call on a vote to accept this report as presented. Councillor Cross, do you vote to accept the report?
Yes, I do.
And Councillor Maxwell, do you vote to accept the report?
Yes, I do.
And Councillor Olmsted?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I vote yes as well. So this resolution is also carried. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is C, bylaw number 2021-012. And it's a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for her first quarter of January the 1st to March 31st, 2021. So we had the first and second reading already taken care of. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for the third reading. Councillor Maxwell, can you move this one?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And Councillor Olmsted, could you second this one?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So we have this, excuse me, bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council as reported by the committee of the whole to be read a third time passed in number 2021-012, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any discussion on this one? Councillor Maxwell.
No discussion.
And Councillor Cross.
No discussion.
And Councillor Olmsted.
No discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to call this one to a vote for the third reading of the proceedings of council for the first quarter. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Maxwell, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So this third reading is approved, and this bylaw is also approved. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay. Report for 2021 census. So next item on the agenda is D, Statistics Canada. It's support for the 2021 census. And I'll need a mover and a seconder for this one. Councillor Cross, can you move this one, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And Councillor Maxwell, could you second this one, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So we have a resolution moved by Councillor Cross, seconded by Councillor Maxwell, and it goes as follows. This resolution be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of Mississauga Calvin supports the 2021 census and encourages all residents to complete their census questionnaire online at www.census.gc.ca. Accurate and complete census data supports programs and services that benefit our community. It also provides us budget money, right? Any discussion on this? Councillor Cross.
No, just I think it's a good idea that we get the word out and we encourage everybody to do it. It's for our own well-being.
Benefit.
Okay. Councillor Olmsted.
No discussion. Good idea.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell.
No discussion?
Okay, so I'm going to call this to a vote, please. That we support encouraging people to fill out the questionnaire. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Maxwell, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So this resolution is carried. Okay, so someone declared, this was you, Heather, right? You declared a conflict on this one?
I did. I declared a conflict. I'll leave.
Okay. So I'm going to need a mover and a seconder on this one here. It's item E. It's East Nipissing Parry Sound Veterinary Clinic, Veterinary Assistance Program. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for this one. Heather's declared a conflict. So Sandy, can you move this one, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And Dan, can you second this one, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have the resolution moved by Councillor Cross, seconded by Councillor Maxwell, that Council hereby authorizes payment of the 2021 contribution to the East Nipissing Parry Sound Veterinary Unit in an amount of $300 so that large animal owners within the municipality of Calvin may continue to receive subsidized vet services. Any discussion? Councillor Maxwell.
No discussion.
Councillor Cross.
No discussion.
Okay, so I'll bring this to a vote then. Do you vote to proceed with this payment, Councillor Cross?
Yes, I do.
And Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
And I do as well. So this resolution is carried. Thank you, everyone. So the next item on the agenda is item F. Heather? Oh, Heather, there you are. Hi, Heather.
I'm back. Hi.
Is item F. It's bylaw number 2021-014, and it's a bylaw to enter into a lease agreement for a photocopier, scanner, and printer. So the bylaw is was included in our council package. So we're going to do the first and second readings tonight, hopefully. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for the first reading. Councillor Homestead, could you move the first reading?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Cross, could you second the first reading?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So this is the bylaw to enter a lease agreement with the Landon Financial Services Canada Inc. for 2021 Toshiba E-Studio 4515 AC photocopier, scanner, printer. Any discussion? Councillor Olmsted.
No discussion. Cindy made it very clear this is the economical way to go. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
No discussion.
And Councillor Cross.
No discussion.
Okay, thank you. So take a vote on the first reading to approve entering into this agreement. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, do you vote
Yes.
yes or no?
Yes, I do.
And Councillor, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Yep. Great, thank you. I vote yes as well. So I'm gonna need a mover and a seconder on the second one, please. So, Councillor Maxwell, can you, move the second reading?
Yes, I can.
Yes. And, Councillor Olmsted, could you second it, please?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So this is the second reading of the same motion to enter the agreement, for the, printer, scanner, and, photocopier. Any discussion this time, Councillor Cross?
No discussion.
Councillor Olmsted?
No discussion.
And Councillor Maxwell?
No discussion.
Okay, thank you. So we'll call the second reading to a vote, to, accept entering into this lease agreement. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the second reading is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a bylaw number 2021-013. It's a bylaw, excuse me, to enter into a boundary road agreement for maintenance repair with Papineau Cameron. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for the first reading as well. So Councillor Cross, could you move the first reading, please?
Yes, I can.
And Councillor Maxwell, could you move this? Will you second the first reading?
Yes.
Thank you. So there were some details in the bylaw that was provided to us. So we have the first reading moved by Councillor Cross, second by Councillor Maxwell. That this is a bylaw to authorize the corporation municipality of Calvin to enter in a boundary road agreement with the corporation of the township of Papineau Cameron in the district of Nipissing, province of Ontario, for the maintenance and repair of certain sections of the boundary road system between the municipalities herein. So any discussion on this, Councillor Cross?
No, I think this is a very fair and equitable agreement. Keeps our assets where they should be, and we know how the work will be proceeded with. So I think it's great that they came up with this. Good job for Chris and Cindy and Jason.
Councillor Olmsted, any discussion?
Oh, good collaboration. No, it's good. Good collaboration.
And Councillor Maxwell?
No discussion.
Okay. So I'm going to call the first reading to a vote to enter into this agreement, for approval to enter into this agreement. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Maxwell, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
I vote yes as well. So the first reading is passed. Then we'll need a mover and a seconder on the second reading. Same bylaw, different reading. So Councillor Olmsted, could I get you to move this one, please?
Yes, I can.
And Councillor Cross, could you second this one, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is the second reading of the same bylaw. Any discussion on this reading? Councillor Maxwell?
No discussion.
And Councillor Cross?
No discussion.
And Councillor Olmsted?
No discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to call a vote on the second reading to authorize the corporation to move into this agreement. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So thank you, everyone. That's the first and second reading of that bylaw. So next item on the agenda is council management discussion of 2021 preliminary municipal budget, and dash for tonight, May 11th, 2021 version. We were supplied a copy of what we received at our last meeting with some changes in the highlighted areas. Everyone's had a chance to look through that. So I'm going to ask individually, or we want to go through it like the last time we went through section by section? Or do we need to? Can we just look at the highlighted areas? I'm going to, Councillor Maxwell, what do you think of that?
I'd be okay just looking at the changes, only things that were changed.
Okay, and Councillor Cross? Hello, Councillor Cross?
Oh, yes, I said, just look at the changes.
Okay, and Councillor Olmsted?
Yeah, changes only.
Okay.
But we have to go section by section because of Dan, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so the first change was, Dan, I think, has declared a conflict on this one because it has to do with the fire department, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the highlighted area shows a reduction of, I believe, $5,000. Is that correct, Dean?
Yeah. If you don't mind, Brian, I'd like to go through it line by line. I could explain what we did.
Go for it.
Because I did go up and above. I think in general senses, I think that you wanted to see a little bit more reduction than we actually discussed. So I did do some fine tuning here. So on line 100 in salaries, I took.
Cindy likes to say something.
Yeah, can I just interrupt? This is still in revenues. So I'll just explain what happened here. Sorry, Dean. I'm getting ahead of yourself. That's all. So in this particular section, this first highlight, all it was done. The reason I highlighted this is I had put this the grant in with other fire revenue originally when I had put this in the revenues, but because it's a provincial grant, it was moved to this fire grant provincial section. So that's the only reason that this was highlighted. It had previously been included. It was just in a different section, and I've put it in the proper place now. So that's the only reason this section here was highlighted. Okay?
Yep.
Anything else like that, Cindy?
I'll just quickly go through the revenues so that everybody knows what happened. So in the next section, so I'm looking at account number 140107143.
28, okay.
There was, previously we did not have Mayor Pennell's donation to the Go Forward strategy included in this. We hadn't received it yet, so that's why I hadn't put it in there. But we've received it now, so it's included. So that went up from $1,000 to $3,000. And this is where the next section, line 32, account number 140107146. This is where I previously had the TPON provincial grant for the training that Chief Maxwell alluded to in his report. This is where I had previously put it. But I've moved things into the proper location, so this one was actually reduced by the amount of so the other one went up, this one went down. So it's still the same amount that's still in revenues, it's just allocated slightly different. And this last section in the revenues, so line 60, account number 140110203. I added a little bit of money here. Previously, it was $5,000 that I'd had here for only the server that we put away $5,000 every year. Because of the discussion that happened last year, I am also taking the $10,000 from, not last year, the discussion that happened at last meeting. I'm taking $10,000 from the modernization money that we had left over from the modernization money that we were given, the $206,000, so that we can modernize the website and increase our cybersecurity. So that's coming out of reserves instead of going towards the taxpayer. And that's the changes that were made in the revenue section.
That, just while we're talking about that cybersecurity, that was also in the report from Grant Thornton. It was, I think, item G. It was about cybersecurity, a website, and financial transactions and that sort of stuff. So I think it's important we move ahead with this one. All right. So there's that one. And the next highlighted area was line 78. It was cost for annual memberships. There wasn't a change there, but it's highlighted. I'm not sure why it was highlighted.
So the change, I did not change the value of the amount that we're budgeting. However, we do now have to include the toolkit for the community safety and well-being plan. So I further checked with E4M in regards to where we're sitting with the E4M HR policies prepared. And they have acquired another person, so it knocked approximately another $1,000 off of the amount of money that we were going to pay for the HR policies. So, which sort of is equivalent to the amount of money that we're going to have to spend for the toolkit for the community safety and well-being. So I added the description in terms of the toolkit for the community safety and well-being plan, but didn't change the value because it balanced each other out.
Okay. Any questions on that one? No? Okay. Next highlighted area was capital expenditures, and it was line item 92. Updates the website required for AODA modernization of the website. So we've already kind of talked about that a little bit. Okay, so and then the next item was postage. I think it dropped 500 from what I can see, comparing it to the line item in the last budget that was presented to us. Correct.
I just dropped it slightly based on last year's actuals, so that it's more in line with that. That's why I dropped it $500.
Okay. Next change I see this is the fire department. Dean, if you want to tell us what you're doing here.
Yeah, so like we discussed, in general, I think there was consent that you wanted to see this number and this actually come down some. So I did work out some extra cuts that we didn't discuss, but so line 100 is the first cut that we did. The rate in the salary was $2,500. We took that out. On line 101, we also did a $500 deduction, and that was flash and badges that we're putting on the gear here. We're just going to divert that for another year. On line 102, vehicle expenditures, we did reduce it by $1,490. Again, that was a Honda portable pump that we were looking to buy for the fire department. And then we did on line 132. Just kind of want to point out that it was originally that line was 14,000. 5,000 of that was from TC Energy, so that kind of like gives that line a real what it's actually based on. We did a tax cut on 136 breathing air. We did $2,300, so we're not purchasing no 4,500 cylinders, 4,500 pound cylinders for the Cascade system, so the upgrading. That was $2,300 there, and that was pretty well everything. It worked out to about $9,000. I shaved off of the original that we discussed last time, $9,092. Is there any questions on that?
Anybody? think Dan won't be asking. Heather?
I'd rather spend the money on the pump than on the firefighter appreciation.
Yeah.
Okay, duly noted. Councillor Cross.
I have actually struggled with this. I know last year with the budget, I had the same issue about the firefighter appreciation amount. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I used to, do the dinner and jams and, feed 300 people for half that amount. I guess it really depends on how much I want to concentrate on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I need to remind myself, and I think the rest of us need to remind ourselves too, that this is for the firefighters who put their lives at risk. Having a meal, is it really worth being nitpicky? I'd actually like to see maybe some of the stuff go back into the budget, because it kind of worries me that you've taken air supply out of your budget. I want to make sure that you actually have enough. I know that we asked you to come back. I think most of us were looking at the firefighter appreciation thing with the numbers, but when you look at it from a different point of view, which I have been able to do this last week, I do want our firefighters to know that they are appreciated, that they do run into a burning building. Their families are without their spouses at home. They're worrying about them. And I do know over the past 4 years, it has gone up about $2,500, because I look back about 2016 at what we used to spend. Maybe let's just keep it at that rate for some time, and then maybe we can come up with another way of showing the appreciation to our firefighters. I do appreciate you, Dean, going in and, skimping off a lot of these things. I just really hope that these are things that aren't needed. Because I don't want to see you shave off just because we wanted that.
I think that the last discussion, it was said I could have one or the other. I think on line 106, it's actually misleading, because the bottom line isn't what it is. Like $1,200 of that line is gone to couriers, water for the fire hall. Anytime we have a fire at the houses or something, we buy food for our guys to feed our guys. So that line there is actually, like, really what we spend on the firefighter appreciation day is $1,500, and then we buy the guys a sweater, which is about $100 a guy, and it works out to the bottom line is about $2,600 for clothing, and then we spend $1,500 in food. And in that food, that allows us, like, that's the line that we actually have to buy. If we're having at somebody's house, we have to rent a porta potty, or we usually we buy the homeowner, whoever does allow us to use their washrooms in the house and stuff. We usually buy them a gift certificate or something. And then $600 of that line is actually given into awards. Next year is actually going to be a really big year for us. And I've actually kind of cut that into 2 chunks now, just to kind of manage it better. So it's not one big chunk. We have 6 guys actually getting a 5-year badge next year. So, and at the same token, I know we've had this discussion in the past, and I think when I had to choose between the other, this is kind of a better way to appreciate our guys, because we do have to pay tax on this money after we finish volunteering for it. We have to give the government their share, which kind of hurts at the end of the year, but we're only allowed to make so much tax-free, right? So this way, it's more appreciated from the guys, because they appreciate, they wear their stuff with pride. They wear their coats, they wear that with pride. So I think it's very important that we treat our guys as best we can, and this is one of the ways we do it. And it's been a tradition. We've been doing it for 25 years I've been here, and I just would like to continue it. There has been a rise in costs in clothing. Like Ken was getting a really smoking deal, but the printing and t-shirts and all that's gone up over the years, so it's to be expected, right?
I don't think anybody here is debating the firefighters not being treated properly, right? So that wasn't part of the discussion at all.
No, I'm just kind of explaining
Okay.
myself. That's
Okay, you had your chance to talk, now I'm gonna
Yeah.
have my chance. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't
All right.
think anyone suggested that at all, or even wanted that suggested, all right? It was just that we asked, you told us at the last meeting, oh, this is my first shot. I expected you to ask me to drop it, so that's what we did, right? And you come through very well for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Dean?
No, that's it.
Okay,
Is
thank
there any
you.
other questions, any other lines? Because I have really good breakdowns now of what's what. If anybody has a question?
Anything, Heather?
No, I mean, I didn't expect you to go that deep, actually. But you did, and I appreciate it, and I understand your stance on it, and it was very well prepared, and thank you. And yes, we appreciate you very much, all you guys.
Yes. Councillor Cross? Anything further?
Just a note, no, just another note to the fact that, I mean, I know Dean works very hard and he is a great fire chief. And I also like to have some recognition for Jacob with his help with the budget as well, because he does put a lot of time into it as well and helps. Everybody deserves their kudos on how well they prepare.
Okay. We'll move on then. So there doesn't seem to be any changes in the roads department. Hello?
Hello. So for the next one is capital expenditures and recreation. With that, got the general impression from council that the doors are something that could be put off for another year or two. So that's been removed. But this line did include the cost of the garbage can for the swimming area. So this line will be adjusted again at the next one with removing that garbage can.
Okay.
Indy?
Yes. I just, for a moment, Mayor Pennell, is that okay?
Yes, please.
Jacob doesn't know this. We just got it, like, right at the end of the day there. I just got it, quotation for the furnace. They've quoted, and we've only got one quote back, so bear in mind this is only one quote. The quote for the furnace for the rink building was $11,000. So it's slightly higher than what we had anticipated. I believe, Jacob, and correct me if I'm wrong, you anticipated 8,000 or 9,000, is that correct?
I had anticipated 6,000 based off the time that we had it quoted a couple of years ago. So if it's $11,000, I'll be talking with the person that quoted and seeing what we can do about bringing that price more in line with what we were expecting.
Any questions
Okay.
for Jacob? No? Okay.
I have a question. $11,000, that's ridiculous for a furnace for that building. That cannot be right. Sorry, I just put a new furnace in last year, it's $3,000. That's just one room. It cannot be $11,000 for a furnace in that building. What type of furnace is this, or what? It seems to me like when people hear the word township, they think they can charge double the amount that it's worth or something.
The furnace that I had requested quoting on was something that would heat the shop area, the change room area, and allow some heat to go into the washroom area as well.
Oh, so we're talking new furnace and with ductwork and everything, I guess.
I haven't seen the quote, so I don't know exactly what they quoted on. I will review that tomorrow and we'll be talking with the contractor to see if there's any way we can reduce the cost of this.
Now, what's heating that building right now? Is it heaters? Is it electric heaters, or is it?
Yeah, the change room is heated with an electric baseboard,
Mhm.
and the shop area is heated with a box electric heater.
And why do we heat that shop area again?
Because we have materials out there that can't freeze. So we keep it heated minimally.
What's out there that can't freeze?
We store paint out there, different stuff for work. There's still the water tanks that are stored in that area, and we also use it for when we work out there on the equipment, or for projects in the hall where we're cutting lumber and stuff like that. We do wind up turning the heat off then. The reason I had asked them, the previous quote I got a couple of years ago did not include the washrooms. The reason I included the washrooms this year was because of the freezing issue we had in the washrooms, the frost getting, I'm guessing, below the holding tank and forcing the building to heave quite severely.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further?
No, I'd just like more information on that whole building before we throw good money at bad ideas. I think we have to look at that more and decide what's going on with that building and what we're purposing, what's the purpose, what we're doing with that building in the bigger scheme of things. It sounds like we're heating it, we're keeping it warm just to keep some paint from freezing. Well, let's move paint inside. The water tanks are not there anymore. I'm just wondering what's going. I'd just like to know what's going on more with that building. Seems like it's an extra building that we don't need to heat anyway.
It's used quite a bit right now, right? That's where people change in the wintertime. It's the washrooms. It's where the equipment is stored, like the snow blowers and that sort of stuff. It's where if work has to be done on that equipment, they work, so there is a use for it. But we can discuss that further when Jacob gets the appropriate quotes for it. I've seen a hand up, Cindy.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that this was just provided to us. I was just telling council that this is what we have been initially quoted. It's only from one supplier. That doesn't mean that's what the cost is going to be. I'm just trying to give council an idea of what we've been provided thus far. So, it's not gospel.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's gotten on to the COVID surcharge bandwagon and upped everybody's prices a little significant. I just put in a furnace last year. It was $6,000, and that was with all ducking. So I'm sure that Jacob will get more and others. And I mean, working in, the cold during winter, I think they need a proper heated space, and using electric baseboards or boxes doesn't sound safe or economical.
I'm not sure what heating that whole building all year round, just so they work in there a few days. Like, what are they working there on in the winter time? It's like the snowblower once in a while. I mean, we have a heated roads department garage that work can be done in there if you need to work on a piece of equipment. But we have to work together on these ideas, and we have to be it has to be realistic on the amount that these things cost. But to heat a building all winter long just to work on a snowblower once in a while, or I don't know, cut some boards or something. I don't know what you'd be doing.
Yes, Cindy?
Again, just to remind council that it's not just for when the rec department works in there. There was a significant heave in the building last year, so the doors don't work properly on the building. That's one of the reasons why we're also suggesting this. So the doors to the bathrooms won't open and close properly anymore.
Any further on that from anyone? Okay. We'll move on. Good discussion on that So I don't see anything else different until we get down to the very end, the levy.
Correct. With the changes that we made, the minimal changes that we did make, it knocked approximately 3% off of the levy.
Very good. Any further discussion on this preliminary budget version?
No.
Okay. Sounds like it's pretty much accepted, except we have some further discussion to do later on. Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda, all right, is the report from the clerk treasurer. It's a report to council of the emergency control group meeting held on May the 5th, 2021. Everyone's had a chance to look at that. Is there any questions from anyone? No?
No questions.
No? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is kind of educational that you could look at if you wanted to. Same as the next one after that, Municipal World. Then after that we have informational letters. Are there anything in the informational letters that you want to do something about, Councillor Cross?
Definitely A.
Okay.
And I was looking at D as well.
The
The bus stop road.
I was looking at the E too.
Yeah. But
Bus stops on dead ends.
yeah. I think letter A is very important as well for people who want to try and do fundraising for their community that doesn't have a non-for-profit organization, that if the government would look at this and change their rules a bit, this would make fundraising a lot more easier for small groups like the CWA or the fire department or whatever to raise funds.
So what is it you
I'd
want to do?
support that.
Support the
Support that
letter.
one? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's A, the lottery list?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then what is it about D you wish to do?
Would just safer places for support that one as well. It's to have safer places for kids to get off the school buses. I mean, having to walk or be let out and have them have to cross a highway is just, I don't know what they can do, but I mean, I like to support it if it's possible.
I'd like to support that too.
All right. Is there anything in there you want to discuss, Councillor Maxwell?
No, nothing that I want to support.
Okay. Councillor Olmsted?
As well as number 7L, the North Bay. For
Joint
it's
filter?
the insurance again, raising municipality taxes because of the severe increase of litigation against municipalities because they think that we have deep pockets. And so I'd like to support that as well. Rising cost insurance for municipalities due to rising litigation costs directly affecting our ratepayers.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. So I guess that's all that's in there, right? Next item on the agenda is information letters available. and it doesn't appear that there are any. And then next item after that is number 9, old and new business. Anything old or new? Sandy?
Nothing for me.
Councillor Maxwell?
Nothing.
Councillor Olmsted?
Yes, last night during our ad hoc committee meeting, we were going to dissolve the committee when Mr. Richardson brought up the fact that we don't have a noise bylaw, and he suggested that perhaps we should have a cutoff time for swimming. He didn't think it was safe to swim in the dark. We all kind of agreed with him, but Cindy suggested that perhaps we can have a noise ordinance, but I thought maybe we could just move forward and see if there's any more complaints with the solutions that we've already made. Just wanted your input, and I wanted to share that for him.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Any thoughts on that? Swimming being a bylaw that says you can't swim after dark? Okay.
Cindy
Cindy?
does.
Jacob had a good suggestion that we might be able to incorporate some time frames into the parking bylaw. So you can only park between, particular hours, something along those lines, so that essentially if you can't park there, you can't swim there.
Good.
That was a suggestion that Jacob made, that, instead of developing a brand new bylaw, we can incorporate it into another bylaw. It's just a suggestion to council that, if council wants to have a noise bylaw or a specific bylaw just for the swimming hole, for hours of operation, for lack of a better word. The only concern, not the only concern, but one of the major concerns would be enforcing it. That's all I wanted to add. For further ideas for council. And Mayor Pennell, if you don't mind, I just have something else along those same lines.
Go ahead, please.
I had another resident contact me in regards to putting up signs, parking signs, similar to the ones we're going to put at the Aimable de Fond fire truck filling station at the Pottawa River at the other end of Peddlers. There are a number of people who use that access, as well as firefighters do when they need to get water or whatever. But a lot of people leave their vehicles there and are gone. They go kayaking for the day or canoeing for the day or something down the river. So she made the resident made a suggestion that maybe we put a sign down there indicating that you can't leave your vehicle unattended. I'm just putting it forward to see if council is interested in something along those lines.
Well, if it's a fire truck filling center, you'd hope that you can get down there and put some water in it, right? So.
It's not designated as such, whereas the one at the Aimable de Fond, we've designated it as a fire truck filling station. Yeah. The one on the Pottawa has not been designated as such.
Do they use it as such?
But they do. I mean, Jacob or Dean can attest to it more than I can, but I do believe they use, the firefighters, when it's necessary, use that area to fill up their fire truck.
How about Jacob, Dean? How often do you use that area?
Yeah, I'll go with that. We do use that area. We use it every year to wash off bridges. We usually do that with conjunction with the roads crew. But the deal is we don't know where our fires are, right? So we need to have access to that at all points, all right? I don't think the initial, that spot was initially made for that. We were talking about putting a dry hydrant there, but it wasn't feasible at the time. So it just became what it is. But I think it was mostly meant to get everybody that fishes Ottawa off the main road. So, but it wouldn't hurt to have it signed out for sure.
I'm putting signs up all over the place.
Yeah. Unfortunate.
Do we have signs down at Beaver Meadow?
No.
No? Do we pull up there?
Yeah, that's one of our that's one of our biggest water spots on the west end of Peddlers is Beaver Meadow.
Yeah. Councillor Maxwell, I've seen your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of sign there. Just I don't like signs in general. I just don't like signs everywhere because nobody pays attention to them unless they're realistic, unless they're reasonable. But people often park there and then they walk up the creek, so their vehicle's unattended. Automatically, as soon as you go, like when is your vehicle unattended? As soon as you walk up the creek to fish by the little rapids there, it's you're too far from your vehicle. I mean, I know that people have been using it this spring to kayak down I think they've been kayaking from that road down to the highway, and they've been having other vehicles out to, but it's a seasonal thing, and it's only while the water is high, because once the summer comes along, the water's so low that you can't kayak down there anyway. It's just while the spring waters, they've been doing that. A couple people I've noticed for a few weekends, but I think we need to allow people to do outdoor activities when they can, and it seems like there's always someone that wants to put a kibosh to anybody having fun, and it's just, they want to kayak the river, so let them kayak the river. I know they've been by somebody's house and somebody didn't like that. Well, you don't own the river. Sometimes that happens. That's my feeling on it.
Councillor Cross.
I drive by there quite often during the weekend, and there has been times where there have been an abundance of vehicles there that come right out almost onto the shoulder of the road. So if there happened to be a fire, I can see there being an issue. We could also consider, if we do put a sign, we could maybe put a sign saying, because a lot of times these people come together as groups. It's not usually a one person thing, but they come together as groups in vehicles. Maybe we could put a sign up there saying, courtesy parking at the town hall, down the road a little bit. Make sure you leave one spot open for fire access. Make it an invitation, but not sounding so you can't park here. That could be a consideration, because really we don't really want them parking right on the road either. But if they have another place to drop off their vehicle and they can all kind of come together up to that spot, would be maybe a solution if they knew where to park. I mean, if there's no parking, there's no parking. But giving them an option of being able to go down to the town hall where there's ample parking during the weekend.
I just think the area was designed as parking to get people off the road. That was the initial idea. That it wasn't designed as a filling station. It's not the ideal filling station because often the water's too low there, and it's a high lift lifting down off that river. So I don't know if the fire department's ever actually even used that area to suction water out of, because there's other areas that are easier to get at. But it's not a big. I don't think it's a big deal. But we have to think of the whole township as a whole and not the one person that has complained sometimes. You have to remember that we have 500 residents to take care of and not one person. You don't always have to put the oil on the squeaky wheel.
I tend to agree with you. I don't know if it was a complaint or a suggestion, but if that's what it was designed for, to keep people off the road. So unless that's changed a whole lot, I don't think we should change it.
I don't think so either then.
And like Councillor Maxwell said, usually when there's that number of vehicles there, it's when in high water, right? Because I know when we were building the bridge, there was a lot of extra work had to be done because they said it was a navigable waterway. And we did it later on in the summer, and you could have, there was no water in the creek at all. So, anyway, just here or there. Okay. So I don't know what we decided for signage down at, well, it was a recommend, or an ask from Mr. Richardson for, a noise bylaw, I believe.
Well, the rest of us on the committee, yeah, the rest of us on the committee basically said, we suggested that probably it was a one-off, but it
Yeah.
maybe perhaps in the future, you know, if it becomes an issue,
Okay.
everybody uses that place respectfully.
Yeah.
So, and if it happens to come up in the future, then perhaps we'll address it there. But like Dan said, we don't want signs, and you said we don't want signs everywhere. Do this, don't do that.
Can't you read the sign? Right.
Exactly, everywhere.
Okay, so I think we've covered off on that one then.
Yeah.
So the next item
Oh, sorry,
is,
Mayor Pennell, just one more thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let council know.
yeah,
The makeup of the Police Services Board is changing because the act regulating Police Services Board is changing. We have to make a decision on how we want the Police Services Board for our region change by June the 7th. That's when the province would like it in. I have attended a webinar, which that date is a little bit fluid because the province is aware of municipalities being extremely busy with other things, COVID, amongst other things at the moment. So the date isn't a hard and fast date, but that being said, we still have to make a decision and get the information into them as soon as possible. So I just wanted to let council know that there is a Police Services Board, the way the current makeup is, a Police Services Board meeting next Wednesday. And myself and the mayor will be attending as guests, as we're not technically on the committee, the board. It's not within the rotation. We're not in it, but just so that our presence is there, they will allow us to ask questions, etc. So I just wanted to let council know that this is something else that's on the table that decisions have to be made. The municipality of Chisholm has made a couple of different suggestions on how the makeup can be done, whether it's done regionally, like east-west, that type of thing, or sort of the way it's kind of set up right now. And you know, they've suggested a couple of different options for us. But again, all of this will be discussed at the Police Services Board next Wednesday, and we'll bring the information back to council after that.
Thank you.
and this is the board that was constructed incorrectly, right, and it has to be changed, right? And it was run, well, set up improperly and run that way for years, so now it has to be changed to be set up properly going forward. I didn't know they were allowing me to go again, though. So that's good to know. Okay. So now the next item on the agenda is the council approval report. We should have a resolution for that, please. So I'll need a mover and a seconder for this resolution. Councillor Maxwell, can you move this one?
Yes, I can.
And Councillor Olmsted, can you second it, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we have this resolution moved by Councillor Maxwell and seconded by Councillor Olmsted that the disbursements dated May the 5th, 2021 in the amount of $12,734.70 and May the 11th, 2021 in the amount of $17,170.60 be hereby authorized and passed for payment. Any discussion on that? Councillor Olmsted.
No discussion.
Councillor Cross.
No discussion.
Councillor Maxwell.
No discussion.
Okay. I'm going to call this for a vote that we accept these disbursements. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Olmsted
Yes.
and Councillor Maxwell.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So so this resolution is also carried. So the next item on the agenda is the closed portion of the meeting. So I'll need a mover and a seconder to move into the closed portion. Councillor Cross, can you move this one?
Yes, I can.
And Councillor Maxwell, can you second this one?
Scan.
Thank you. So we have this resolution moved by Councillor Cross, seconded by Councillor Maxwell, that this portion of the meeting be now closed under Section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act for the purpose of personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, as per Section 239(2)D of the Municipal Act for the purpose of labor relations or employee negotiations, and as per Section 239(2)I, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, or labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or the local board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organization, re Spruce Road 2021 employee wage negotiations, and Castle Home. Any discussion on this? No? Okay, so I'll vote, going to call for a vote to move into the closed session. Councillor Cross, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Councillor Olmsted, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Councillor Maxwell, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so this resolution is carried.
Okay, I am going to turn off the recording.